Greetings, welcome back to Sam Bloom's Bulk Goods, where we are discussing environmental collapse, environmental destruction, degradation, pollution, global warming, biosphere collapse, mass extinction, whatever it is you want to call it. It's all kind of one big thing. Starting off this video a little frustrated because it took me 15 minutes to get my Wi-Fi working well enough to actually get this program to start. But all that is to say, I had something in mind to talk about, and after all my frustrations, I kind of forgot what the heck it was I had in mind. Of course, very scary and troubling news on the world theater as far as Syria and Israel and Trump and Russia and all kinds of stuff going on. It just gets more and more bizarre as the days go by. And what's bizarre is to kind of watch the mainstream media and then watch the alternative media, and it's like there's two entirely different worlds of thought going on, and somewhere in reality they meet somewhere. I don't know, but I'm kind of keeping my ears and my eyes open to all of the news, because the people in the alternative world, or even in the quote unquote conspiracy world, have ideas and theories about why things are happening and what's going on that I find intriguing and sometimes more true than what the mainstream news wants to tell people is going on. That doesn't mean that I automatically discount the mainstream news. That's not my it's not my general take on it, but I do take all information in with a high degree of skepticism. Let's just put it that way. Even the alternative news, I don't just listen and go, yeah, that's what's happening, man. No, I mean, I'm just listening. I'm just taking in information like, okay, that's a theory. That's an idea. Totally acceptable to do that in this world. And at any time in human history, it has been acceptable and actually a logical and favorable thing to do is take in information with an unbiased ear and just take it in and think about it. It's a good thing to do. I have a really off the wall theory that maybe a few people in the comment section have I think maybe a couple people have bandied about this theory. What if the powers that be know that the biosphere is collapsing and climate change is really, really bad? Of course, Trump knows that climate change is real. I mean, I think that his whole take on climate change is absolutely not what he truly knows about it. Of course, the Department of Defense knows about climate change. Of course, the military knows about climate change. Of course, they all know how bad it is. So what if the powers that be are trying to get us into a little small scale nuclear war to on some like Dr. Evil mad scientist I don't know, some mad scientist tangent that they're trying to start like some kind of limited nuclear war so that they can cool the planet. I don't give that theory. I give that theory maybe about a 15 or 20% likelihood of being possible, maybe even less. But it does cross my mind the idea that maybe they all know how bad it is, and they all know that something has to be done. So you take out a bunch of, you take out a bunch of population, and you throw a bunch of junk into the air, and you fix that climate change problem in a second. Who knows? Let's hope that that's not what they are thinking. Let's hope that that's not the strategy. Because I don't understand, if the cabal or the deep state or the whatever, whoever it is that's running us into this crazy World War III scenario, like, I don't understand what the upside is to all of this. I don't understand what it is. Like, how do you win this situation? How do you win in this situation if you push superpowers into unleashing nuclear arsenals? I don't understand what the upside is. If there's a plan, somebody tell me what the point of the plan is, and I'm talking to the conspiracy theorists. I'm talking to the, all the QAnon people and all the, the military industrial deep state cabal, devil worshiping pedophile, whatever that whole thing is, that this whole, and it's, all tied into the Catholic Church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. I'm just, there's this whole like thing that's going on. Right. And on some level, I find it very interesting, but then I on another level, I'm like, what's the point of it? What's the point of all the control if you don't have anything, if there's nothing left to control? I don't know. Anyways, just throwing out some ideas about what might or might not be happening in the world. Who knows? But the scary thing is that we are getting pushed into a war, and let's hope that's not, let's hope somebody somewhere says, nah, we're not going to do it. We're going to be calm and cool and rational. But after Nikki Haley, giving her very heartfelt plea to the UN, about having to, go in and defend these poor innocent people in Syria, I don't, that's, we've reached full WMD, a full WMD scenario, right? Like, how do we not go, how do the Western forces not go in and do something now? It's going to be very hard to resist this, this push. I don't know. On to environmental news. Keystone pipeline leak in South Dakota about double previous estimate. You don't say. This is from April 7th, Reuters staff. The Keystone crude oil pipeline leak in November in rural South Dakota was nearly double the original estimate, making it one of the largest U.S. inland spills since 2010, a newspaper report on Saturday said. Robin Tisver, a spokeswoman for Calgary-based TransCanada Corporation, which owns the pipeline, told the Aberdeen American News some 9,700 barrels of oil leaked in the November 16 spill, the South Dakota paper reported. The original estimate was 5,000 barrels, off by a little bit. The spill gave further ammunition to environmental groups and other U.S. opponents. What ammunition? Don't do that. Other U.S. opponents of another pipeline the company has proposed, the long-delayed Keystone XL. TransCanada had shut down the 590,000 barrel per day pipeline, one of Canada's main crude export routes, linking Alberta's oil fields to U.S. refineries. Immediately following the spill, operations were restarted less than 2 weeks later. TransCanada officials were not immediately available for comment. The TransCanada spokeswoman told the newspaper repairs had been made on the pipeline and a cleanup conducted. We have replaced the last of the topsoil and have seeded the impacted area. Tisver said in an email sent to the American News, late Friday evening. Just, I don't know, isn't that an actual news outlet? Or is that just generic American news? The paper said, Keystone has leaked, I guess it's a paper. Keystone has leaked substantially more oil and more often in the United States than the company indicated to regulators and risk assessments before operations began in 2010, according to the documents reviewed by Reuters. Of course it has. On to weather anomalies. We have, cold weather in the Midwest, and Sydney and Adelaide in Australia experienced hottest April day on record. Sydney and Adelaide are experiencing their hottest April day on record, with the mercury soaring above 35 degrees in both capitals. At Observatory Hill in Sydney at 3 p.m., the temperature climbed to an unusual 35.4 degrees for this time of year. The previous record for Sydney was 34.2 degrees on April 6th, 2016. West Terrace in Adelaide soared to a sweltering 36.1 degrees at 2:26 p.m., breaking its previous record of 35.8 degrees in 1938. It comes as the everlasting summer just keeps on giving, with many parts of the country hitting unseasonably high temperatures today. Temperatures in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide have hit about 10 degrees above the April average. Last week, Sydney recorded its warmest first week of April since 1977 at Observation Hill. Sydney Airport hit 36.8 degrees at 2:04 p.m. The unusually warm weather is due to a high-pressure system that is bringing a mass of hot air to the country's southeastern states. The blissful conditions are going to stick around for the rest of the week, Weather Zone has confirmed. Yet, Sydney siders, that's what they're known as, 36 degrees is 36 Celsius is 96 or 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Sydney siders will feel a cooler change tomorrow with a top of 25 degrees expected, but then the rest of the week we'll see temperatures nudging 30 degrees. On the weekend, Sydney's west will be slightly warmer at 32 degrees. As Adelaide has reached more than 35 degrees today, it is the warmest 3-day period from Saturday to Monday in April on record. Parts of South Australia, including Adelaide, are actually in the midst of a late season low-intensity heat wave. Guess what the temperature was here in Los Angeles today? Just all of a sudden, it was 96, or 95. No, I believe it was 96 was the high in Los Angeles. I passed a thermometer at one point today that read 95. The official high said 96. Just, we've been kind of bouncing, around, between the high 60s and maybe, high 70s a little bit. And just all out of the blue, bam, we get hit with this huge temperature spike today. I don't know what the rest of the week is going to look like, but it was very, very abnormal and very weird and very hot. Not good for gardens that are trying to struggle to find a footing, some kind of temperature footing. I have a, I have a very bad feeling, and I think a lot of people do, that this will be the year that climate change really kind of breaks out of the just under the radar phase that it has been in. Is this the year that we start seeing, flash heat waves all over the world? Is this the year, that we see temperatures in the 10s and the 20s all over the U.S. and in other parts of the world? Do we start seeing, insane, abnormally high temperatures in the 120s, 130s, say in the Middle East or in India. This could be the year. Is this the year that an extreme weather event, heat, fire, storm, knocks out a city, knocks out power, knocks out a grid? Maybe, maybe not, but it's, shaping up to be, I think one of the commenters said something about in Oregon, was it Medford, setting a temperature record yesterday. Other people have been bringing me temperature reports of record high temperatures while we're getting record low temperatures around the rest of the country. This does not bode well. This is not good news. Moving on to, I think, the last article I'm going to cover tonight. And I'm going to read a couple comments. This is from Fastco Design. Smartphones are killing the planet faster than anyone expected. Well, if you know about, how badly we're polluting the planet, you might expect them to kill the planet pretty fast. Researchers are sounding the alarm after an analysis showed that buying a new smartphone consumes as much energy as using an existing phone for an entire decade. Before you upgrade your next iPhone, you may want to consider a $29 battery instead. Not only will the choice save you money, it could help save the planet. A new study from researchers at McMaster University, published in the Journal of Cleaner Production, analyzed the carbon impact of the whole information and communication industry from around 2010 to 2020, including PCs, laptops, monitors, smartphones, and servers. They found remarkably bad news. Even as the world shifts away from the giant tower PCs toward tiny energy-sipping phones, the overall environmental impact of technology is only getting worse. Whereas ICT represented 1% of the carbon footprint in 2007, it's already tripled and is on its way to exceed 14% by 2040. That's half as large as the carbon impact of the entire transportation industry. Smartphones are particularly insidious for a few reasons. With a 2-year average life cycle, they are more or less disposable. The problem is that building a new smartphone, and specifically mining, the rare materials inside them represents 85 to 95% of the device's total CO2 emissions for 2 years. Let me pause this for a second. Smartphones are particularly, hold on. Yet even as people are now buying phones less often, consumer electronic companies are attempting to make up for lost profits by selling bigger, fancier phones. The researchers found that smartphones with larger screens have a measurably worse carbon footprint than their smaller ancestors. Apple has publicly disclosed that building an iPhone 7 Plus creates roughly 10% more CO2 than the iPhone 6S. But an iPhone 7 standard creates roughly 10% less than a 6S. So according to Apple, the trend is getting better, but the bigger phones companies like Apple sell seem to offset some gains. Another independent study concluded that the iPhone 6S created 57% more CO2 than the iPhone 4S, and despite the recycling programs run by Apple and others, based on our research and other sources, currently less than 1% of smartphones are being recycled. Lotfi Belker, the study's lead author, tells me. That seems insane to me, because in order to get a phone upgraded, like, you have to turn in your old phone. Seems a little strange. In any case, keeping a smartphone for even 3 years instead of 2 can make a considerable impact to your own carbon footprint, simply because no one has to mine the rare materials for a phone you already own. It's a humbling environmental takeaway, especially if you own Samsung or Apple stock. Much like buying a used gasoline-fueled car is actually better for the environment than purchasing a new Prius or Tesla, keeping your old phone is greener than upgrading to any new one. Smartphones represent a fast-growing segment of ICT, but the overall largest culprit with regards to CO2 emissions belongs to servers and data centers themselves, which will represent 45% of ICT emissions by 2020. Yeah. It's because every Google search, every Facebook refresh, and every dumb tweet we post requires a computer somewhere to calculate it all in the cloud. The numbers could soon be even worse depending on how popular cryptocurrencies get. Here, the smartphone strikes again. The researchers point out that mobile apps actually reinforce our need for these 24/7 servers in a self-perpetuating energy-hogging cycle. More phones require more servers, and with all this wireless information on the cloud, of course, we're going to buy more phones capable of running even better apps. As for what can be done on the server end, Belker suggests that government policies and taxes might make a difference, whatever needs to be done to get these servers migrated over renewable energy sources. Google, Facebook, and Apple have all pledged to move to 100% renewable energy in their own operations. In fact, all of Apple's servers are currently run on renewable power. It's encouraging, says Belker, of those early corporate efforts, but I don't think it'd move the needle at all. If this all sounds like bad news, it's because it absolutely is bad news. To make matters worse, the researchers calculated some of their conclusions conservatively. The future will only get more dire if the Internet of Things takes off and many more devices are hitting up the cloud for data. We are already witnessing Internet-enabled devices ranging from the smallest form factors such as wearable devices to home appliances and even cars, trucks, and airplanes. If this trend continues, one can only wonder on the additional load these devices will have on the networking and data center infrastructures, in addition to the incremental energy consumption incurred by their production. The team writes in the study, unless the supporting infrastructure moves quickly to 100% renewable power, the emergence of the IoT could potentially dwarf the contribution of all the other traditional computing devices and dramatically increase the overall global emissions well beyond the projections of this study. Indeed, tech's carbon footprint is beyond what any one designer, one company, or even one government regulator can contain. As consumers, we have more reason than ever to hesitate when it comes to our next shiny tech splurge. The bottom line is that we need to buy less and engage less for the health of this entire planet. Ding. Move on to some comments I want to read for a long time. So these might perhaps be dated somewhat. But very quickly, somebody commented about maybe people being turned off by, a hopium aspect of this channel. I don't know. I think some people are intrigued by the hopium aspect of this channel. So, I just wanted to quickly say that any hopium that I espouse is with the knowledge of how dire things are and how impossible making a change or turning things around might actually be. So I think there's a difference between hopium based on a lack of touch with reality, or lack of a sense of reality, or lack of knowledge of reality, and then there's hopium based on knowing what we should know and knowing how bad things are. Where do you go from there, if there is somewhere to go? Also, I think that taking any steps to mitigate your own carbon footprint, or get off the grid, or take yourself out of the paradigm as we know it, may not make a change in the overall problem of climate change or climate destruction, or environmental destruction. It may not make a change or a big impact, but the thing is, it will change your life incredibly, right? The less you have to rely on, the more you notice what you use and what you consume, and the less you can rely on the knee-jerk, unconscious consuming that we all, engage in. The more you can be conscious about it, the less you can rely on it, the stronger you will be as a human being. The stronger you will be in the future, when many, many people won't have the things that they have now, and they are going to absolutely fall apart. because they don't have those things. So the more self-reliant you can make yourself, the more detached you can become from this paradigm, the stronger you are as a human, the better you're going to be able to survive and go forward on this planet in a very, very dire and dark future. So I suggest continuing to do all that you can do to get off the grid, prep, do whatever it is you have to do. This is from Andreas Hofer. This is 11 days ago. It is a very important point. CO2 emissions of the richest 1% are nearly 200 times as high as CO2 emissions of the poor 50%, the poorest 50% of the people. We have to force the rich, which are creating the bulk of the problem, to change their lifestyle if humanity wants to have any hope for surviving. This insight isn't widely known, even here in the Doomosphere, where often overpopulation is thought as the main problem, which is a severe problem for habitat destruction and future CO2 emissions by lifting up the living standard of the poorest. This Guardian article says that the richest 10% of the world emit half of the anthropogenic carbon. The bottom poor half of humanity, only 10% of the emitted CO2. So who has to change his lifestyle if we want to rescue our ecosystem on which we all together depend on? A luxurious lifestyle has to be seen as evil as it is, and we will probably have to outlaw such lifestyles. Great point, Andreas. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I wish that one of the Leonardo DiCaprios and the Al Gores of the world could work in some teaching by example. Like instead of building green tourist communities, a la Leonardo, or taking planes all over the world to speak on climate change, or having investment companies, et cetera, that are, instead of doing all that, instead of trying to teach people about climate change within the paradigm of consumption, why not teach people that consumption itself is the problem, and model a lifestyle that uses much, much less consumption, right? If Leonardo DiCaprio was like, the problem is rich people are the problem, so I'm not going to fly in planes anymore, I'm not going to have 18 yachts anymore, I'm not going to, whatever. Gee, what a statement that might be. The making of movies is incredibly damaging to the environment. The making of TV shows is incredibly damaging to the environment. Not only the fact that they model consumption for everybody else to, mimic, right? All movies and all TV shows are telling people, look, here's how all people should live. You should live like this. They're subtle commercials for our entire paradigm. Okay. This is from Real Eyes, Real Eyes, Real Eyes, 11 days ago. This is in response to the African Anthropocene article. Interesting story, but any story about Africa should at least acknowledge several hundred years of the most brutal exploitation the world has ever seen. It turns my stomach just recounting all the various atrocities, starting with the slave trade that lasted hundreds of years and killed and enslaved hundreds of millions, the most brutal spectacle humanly possible, which rose hand in hand with capitalism. Surprise, surprise. Hundreds of years of foreign actors stealing resources, preventing development, leading to millions of deaths by starvation, millions of deaths by diseases, long ago conquered by the West and completely preventable, medicines forbidden or too expensive for Africans to this day, I might add. And then there is King Leopold's soulless army called the Force Publique, who in the early 1900s killed 10 to 15 million Africans. Their claim to fame was chopping off fingers and toes and arms of children if they didn't meet their rubber sap quota. That is still happening today, by the way, in mines in Africa. For our first automobile tires, finally exposed by Alice Seeley Harris, Hers was the first picture taken, toes and fingers, published in English newspapers that actually changed governmental policies. After World War II, America gave Africa to the European countries to exploit for rebuilding. That didn't last long, though, and America is there wreaking havoc to this very day. It's called AFRICOM, United States African Command. 6 million killed since 1996 in the Congo, brutal genocide backed by the West, going on to this very day. I could go on and on, but it really does bother my stomach. Excellent point made. Yeah, the article was very, very timid and didn't really go into the history of exploitation that Africa has been subject to in the last 400 or 500 years at least. This is from Dueling Mongos, 11 days ago. I first became aware of global warming and the threat of catastrophic climate change in 1971 when I was 13 years old. And I saw a TV movie called LA 2017, directed by a very young Steven Spielberg. The show depicts a future where the air has become unbreathable by global algae blooms caused by runaway greenhouse effect, as occurred during the Permian extinction. There's a very prophetic scene where septuagenarian musicians are performing rock and roll music in 2017. Here is a link of the review of LA 2017, which is not generally available on video, but is occasionally shown on TV on retro channels that include the TV series Name of the Game. A couple of years later, the films Soylent Green and Silent Running were released with predictions of the world in the first quarter of the 21st century having global warming in it and a devastated environment. These two movies are actually available on YouTube. I think every millennial should watch these catastrophic climate change watch these films so they can realize the outrageous fact that over 45 years ago, people were already aware of the potential threat of global warming and catastrophic climate change. As a teenager in the 70s, I became very concerned about this global warming thing. It seemed that the solution was obvious. Use sunshine on photovoltaic cells to generate electricity that can use the process of electrolysis to turn seawater into hydrogen fuel, which can be used in modified car engines. The combustion exhaust would not have any CO2. I would tell everybody about my clean energy solution. 70s was an era where there was a huge push for energy independence from Middle East oil. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the top of the White House. At that time, there was a glimmer of hope for a green energy solution that would avert global warming and avert a future Middle East war over oil. Then Ronald Reagan was elected president. He tore the solar panels off the White House and made James Watt Secretary of the Interior. As years went by and my dreams of green energy seemed to be stalled, I gradually realized that the oil companies and coal companies and natural gas companies and the auto manufacturers were perfectly content with the way things were and had no intentions of allowing any green energy to crash their party. Now Reagan is dead. No worries for him. Jimmy Carter lives on, building more habitats for humanity. And now here we are on the verge of the sixth mass extinction. I now know that my dreams of green energy future were doomed from the start, since the billionaire good old boys club had the game totally rigged. They knew about the global warming threat back in 1971, just like everyone else who watched LA 2017 on national network TV. And the only thing they were concerned about was making sure that the politicians would maintain the status quo. And indeed, we have remained captive to the oil industry's corporate state has made sure that business is far more important than people's health or people's future. That's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Hope to be back tomorrow with another video. Thank you all those who have contributed to this channel financially. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Very helpful, very needed, and just helps the whole process continue to go forward. Hope to be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.